Welcome, focused learners, to today's Explainer. We are tackling a universal frustration today. Have you ever read an entire book, binge-watched hours of online courses, and felt like, yeah, I've absolutely got this theory down, only to completely freeze up when it was actually time to act? It is so incredibly frustrating. You know exactly what to do in your head, but your hands just kinda won't cooperate. Well, today we're fixing that. We're going to look at the fascinating biology of how we actually transform static knowledge into dynamic, real-world action. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for the Explainer today. First up, knowing versus doing. Second, the exact anatomy of skill. Third, brain secrets and deliberate practice. Fourth, the 30-day action plan. And finally, skill, the true key to freedom.
Section 1. Knowing versus doing. The core problem.
Right, so what actually is the difference between someone who just knows and someone who can do? I mean, why is it that someone with far less formal education can sometimes just execute tasks and make split-second decisions way better than someone who spent years in a classroom? You've probably seen this in your own workplace, right? The difference between these two people isn't about what facts they hold in their heads. It's entirely about what they can physically execute in the moment.
Think of it like this. Knowledge is just knowing that a car needs 4 properly inflated wheels to balance on the road. That's the what. You can read that in a manual. But skill is successfully changing a blown tire on the side of a busy highway in the pitch dark while it's pouring rain. Skill is the how. It's that physical, tangible bridge between a theoretical concept and actually getting it done in the real world. So, the crucial point comes down to this definition. Skill is the ability to implement knowledge into physical action in your body and limbs, yielding a desired, repeatable result. Without this bridge, your deep knowledge, no matter how vast or impressive, just stays completely stagnant. It's locked inside your head, basically useless to you and the world around you when a real challenge pops up.
Section 2. The exact anatomy of skill. Building the bridge.
Back in 1967, psychologists Fitz and Posner mapped out 4 distinct stages of learning. First is the cognitive stage. This is where you're just figuring out the rules and honestly making a ton of mistakes. Next is the associative stage. Patterns start emerging and you make fewer errors. Third is the autonomous stage, where you can do it without thinking too much. But here's the catch. Most people get completely stuck in stages 2 or 3. They get good enough and just stop. But reaching stage 4, true expert level, where you can teach it and invent new methods, that requires deliberately stepping out of your comfort zone.
And speaking of expertise, I'm sure you recognize this number, 10,000. Anders Ericsson's famous 10,000-hour rule. It's been repeated everywhere, but here's the thing. It is literally one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of modern self-improvement.
Ericsson never actually said that just doing something for 10,000 hours makes you a master. I mean, simple, mindless repetition just reinforces bad habits. If you type poorly for 10,000 hours, guess what? You just become a world-class expert at typing poorly. What Ericsson really found is that mastery requires deliberate practice. This means having highly specific goals, getting immediate feedback, and constantly stretching yourself just beyond your current abilities. That is the only real guarantee of continuous growth.
Section 3. Brain secrets. Deliberate practice.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the biological reality of what practice does to your brain cells. Researcher Daniel Coyle found something absolutely amazing about a substance called myelin. When you practice, specific cells called oligodendrocytes wrap this myelin around your neural pathways. It's exactly like rubber insulation wrapping around a copper wire. As this myelin layer gets thicker through practice, it speeds up the electrical signals in your brain by up to 100 times. It's wild. Skill literally physically lives in the biology of your brain.
And a landmark 2012 MIT study actually showed us where this myelin highway leads. When you first start learning, you use your prefrontal cortex. That handles conscious decision-making. But as you can probably guess, it is incredibly slow and burns a massive amount of energy. As you practice and build up that myelin, control physically shifts over to the basal ganglia, which is the brain's automatic habit center. It's lightning fast and super low energy. This is exactly why an expert doesn't look like they're trying hard. They literally aren't using the exhausting part of their brain anymore.
So how do we trigger this biological upgrade? Look at the stark contrast between effective skill building and ineffective practice. Ineffective practice is vague, it's comfortable, and you're distracted. Effective building, though, demands daily specific goals, immediate feedback, and total presence. But the absolute key here is operating in the learning zone. Deliberate practice means pushing just slightly, about 15 to 20% past your current abilities. That specific struggle is the exact trigger your brain needs to start wrapping that myelin.
Section 4, the 30-day action plan, applying neuroscience.
It is time to zoom out and apply this to your own life. Here is a practical 4-step framework you can use over the next month. Step 1, choose one very specific career skill like coding or public speaking. Step 2, design your deliberate practice session so it's that sweet spot of 15 to 20% harder than what you can easily do today, and figure out your feedback loop. Step 3, map out tiny habits so you actually do it. And Step 4, track that myelin path daily. Keep track of your time, the feedback, and how automatic the skill is starting to feel. And this brilliantly illustrates how to conquer Step 3. This is behavior scientist B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits formula. To make starting your practice completely effortless, link it to something you already do every single day. Identify a trigger, do a tiny version of your practice right after, and immediately give yourself a reward. So for example, after I finish breakfast, that's the trigger, I will practice my presentation out loud for just 5 minutes, the skill, and then I get to drink my favorite green tea, the reward. It totally bypasses the need for motivation and relies entirely on systemized habits.
Section 5. Skill, the true key to freedom. True empowerment.
When you're building these myelin pathways, you aren't just getting a little better at a task. You are fundamentally increasing your own personal freedom. Look, knowledge alone might give you a new way to see the world, but it's skill that stabilizes it. When you have a skill hardwired right into your basal ganglia, you don't panic or freeze up in the moment of truth. You automatically turn stressful potential threats into massive opportunities simply because your brain already knows exactly how to handle them.
I want to leave you with this really powerful thought from our source text. Cure ignorance with knowledge, but cure inability only with skill. The market out there will always reward those who can do infinitely more than those who merely know. By designing your own deliberate practice, you are taking active control of your brain's biology. In our next explainer, we'll be looking at how to become the architect of your own practice routines. But until then, ask yourself this: are you going to spend another year just reading about your goals, or are you ready to start rewiring your brain to actually achieve them?